Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week on The Record, a Breton NDP MLA talks about the federal scene and looks to the weeks ahead. Ecole Beau-Port students were awarded Lieutenant Governor Education Medals for Conseil Scolaire Acadien Provincial students. During its regular monthly meeting on May 27th in Arichat, Richmond Municipal Council approved recommendations from its Committee of the Whole dealing with the growing deer population, deteriorating cell service, and the possibility of obtaining a letter of authority for Pondville Beach Provincial Park. And Hawkesbury Town Council held its monthly public meeting on June 3rd. After the meeting, Finance Director Erin MacEachen and Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton took questions from the media. But first, a wildfire that raged for 2 days in eastern Richmond County last week covered an estimated 15 hectares. The fire was reported on May 29th at around 5 p.m. along the Third Rivers Road in the Framboise area, according to the municipality of the County of Richmond. Along with Department of Natural Resource ground crews, volunteer firefighters from the Budladek First Nation, Framboise Forshoe, Grand River, and Lordways departments were dispatched, but hours later, the municipality confirmed that the blaze was out of control. The municipality said it grew to over 15 hectares and crossed at least one road, but no containment was achieved at that time. Third Rivers Road, Sterling Road, and North Framboise Road were all closed by Nova Scotia Public Works. The municipality said that a trailer vacant for over 20 years was lost. One other residence was soaked down as a precaution, while another residence had a sprinkler system set up. Although there were no evacuation orders, the municipality urged the public to remain alert by monitoring emergency channels for updates and following all directions from emergency services. Breton Regional Municipality said its emergency management and fire services were closely monitoring the situation, and if conditions changed substantially, crews would return to the scene. While the fire was not in the CBRM at that time, Mayor Cecil Clark posted that they were in communication with Richmond County officials and monitoring the situation. Clark said CBRM emergency management and fire services were preparing wildland fire support equipment for deployment. Richmond County said operations resumed on the morning of May 30th with around 45 firefighters, including those from the DNR, as well as local fire departments. In an update issued Friday afternoon, the municipality said firefighters were establishing a hose line around the perimeter. Later in the afternoon, the DNR said the wildfire was under control. At that time, the department estimated the size of the fire was still at about 15 hectares, and crews remained on the scene. Those who assisted included the Nova Scotia Emergency Measures Organization, Nova Scotia Public Works, local RCMP detachments, as well as the Breton Regional Municipality Fire Chief and Emergency Management Coordinator. On behalf of the residents of Richmond County, Warden Lois Landry offered sincere gratitude to all the men and women at the scene. On May 16th, there was a separate wildfire that took place near the Morrison Beach Road area, according to the Framboise Forshoe Volunteer Fire Department. Joining me is the NDP MLA for Breton Centre-Whitney Pier. Welcome back, Kendra Coombes.
Thanks for having me.
So it's been a month since the federal election, but I'd like to start off by getting your take on the results. Your party didn't have a great showing, losing a number of seats, sizable portion of the vote share. Leader Jagmeet Singh lost his riding step down. What's your take on what took place on April 28th?
Well, it was not the results that we hoped for. And so, of course, we're very disappointed in that. It was a historic campaign in terms of what was going on globally and at home. And there was a lot of fear of the future, a lot of polarizing politics that were occurring. And we saw more of a US style of politics, many new Democrats. Unfortunately, great new Democrat MPs and potential MPs were the casualties of that. And people should vote for the party that reflects their values and their hopes, but they didn't feel they could this time because of that global situation and that situation that we were having at home here and in that atmosphere.
Recently, the governments of Canada and Nova Scotia finalized a 10-year agreement under the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund to get more homes built in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia will receive $170.9 million to invest in foundational infrastructure, including drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste systems necessary to unlock sustainable long-term housing supply. Does this look like enough to meet those goals?
We know that I think it's a help to meet the goals for housing, but we need so much more. So much more infrastructure is needed to combat one, the situation we've seen with people who are unhoused, and the situation that we have with people who are unable to afford their homes now. So a lot more money is going to be needed. This is great. This is truly a help. But we need to know from the Houston government how they plan on using that money. So we're waiting to hear from the premier on exactly how his government is planning on using that money to go into housing.
In a press release issued on May 6th, NDP leader Claudia Kendra said Nova Scotia renters are finding it harder and harder to afford homes, and this government is failing to improve protections for them. Rental housing affordability is an ongoing concern in Nova Scotia, your party stated, noting that Nova Scotia has the highest rent cap in all of Canada at 5%. And despite the cap, the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation reported that new tenants saw rents increase an average of 28% last year. What are those protections to which your leader is referring?
What the protections that we need here?
Yes, for renters.
We need real rent control. So what we have is a rent cap, and what is occurring is that people are using fixed term leases. So it's a year lease, and they can decide to not renew that to the renter. Then the renter moves on to another place, and the landowner is able to actually increase the rents again.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows them to increase the rents there, but real rent control would actually allow for the unit to be tied to rent control, and both the tenant and the landlord would be able to go to a board if there's a need for an increase and if there's a disagreement in the increase to ensure fairness. But that's not what we're seeing here in Nova Scotia. We're seeing the abuse of fixed term leases, and we're seeing other things that are not tied to the rent. So if you have, say, a parking spot, they can increase the parking spot rental fee. And if you need your vehicle for work in that, you need that space, which becomes unaffordable. It's the same with not allowing pets in rental units anymore. So either you find a new place, which then they jack up the price of that rent, or you have to get rid of your fur baby. These are other ways that renters are being at a disadvantage. But a real rent control would actually be more in the favor of and be more middle of the road for both the tenant and the landowner.
Now, your party's demanding answers after a recent Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy response revealed that the Houston government underpaid Nova Scotians who rely on rental supplements to afford their homes. The documents show that confusion over how to calculate rents in certain areas led to delays and inconsistent decisions, your party asserts. The New Democrats are calling on the government to improve the rent supplement program. strengthen renter protections, and make more investments in housing people can actually afford. What is the provincial government now doing to protect tenants currently?
Not much. There doesn't seem to be much that the government is doing. They keep saying they need to strike a balance, and yet there was a call for an enforcement agency, enforcement unit for tenancy, residential tenancies, that came out of a paper that was done, or study, and everyone agreed, tenants and landlords agreed that an enforcement unit was necessary, and yet still the Houston government refused to take that recommendation. So we've had, again, Houston, like we've had Houston's own staff admit that fixed term leases are being abused, and yet they refuse to fix that problem. As for the rent supplement, Nova Scotians need rent support because they're being left behind due to confusion over how to calculate rents in certain areas. So for instance, on the island here, which is important for us, is that as opposed to Halifax, so in Halifax, the CMHC, who does a lot of the rent issues, and they calculate medium rent. They look in Halifax at not just the places that were designed to rent, but they look at what's called the secondary, which is homes having been converted to rentals. Here on island, they don't do that. They only look at the places that were built for renting, and they got to have at least 4 units. So when you look at our island in Cape Breton, the majority of those are most likely belonging to the provincial housing, which means when they're calculating our what's potentially our rent supplement, and they're looking at the medium income or medium rent, they're taking in consideration rent that is already subsidized by 30% for low-income renters. They're not taking into the secondary market. So therefore, many people in Cape Breton Island are not even being considered for the rent supplement. So that's even an added issue for us. But again, I would say, rent supplements are Band-Aid solutions. We need to do more to make housing more affordable. And in the meantime, we need to fix these inconsistencies that are occurring across the board.
Now, the NDP is calling on the Houston government to create an enforcement unit, end the abuse of fixed-term leases, and implement rent control, is what you noted earlier, as renters continue to push for fairness within the residential tenancy system. One Nova Scotian spent almost a year fighting illegal eviction attempts in residential tenancies hearings and small claims court, your party noted. Although she eventually won her court case, her landlords will not face any fines or repercussions, your party noted. What mechanisms should be in place to hold landlords accountable?
That's what the residential tenancy enforcement unit would have those consequences in place. Listen, I've heard of land owners who have taken doors off their tenants' homes, and there's not much that can be done except for the police to come and say, put the door back on. I've heard of landowners who have cut the power and water off of tenants. Now, keep in mind, most tenants are paying for their own power. But I've also heard of tenants who have destroyed homes, who have refused to pay, who have not paid the rent, right? And so We need the real we need real enforcement of the Residential Tenancies Act to crack down on bad actors and create a more fair rental market. And that's how we do it, is through that enforcement agency.
Do you have any indications that the government's going to take action and follow some of the recommendations you guys are?
Well, these recommendations were put to government through a study almost 4 years ago or more. While Colton LeBlanc was the minister for Service Nova Scotia, and he did not seem to have any. He never gave any indication that he was even looking at this. In fact, a lot of the times when we brought these issues up, we were scoffed at. So I didn't see them. My hope is that the new minister for Service Nova Scotia, who's always been a great minister in her role, that's Jill Balzer, will take these into consideration and will make movements on them.
Now, in a press release issued on May 30th, your party called for key reports and agreements to be made public. Your leader, Claudia Chender, called on the Houston government to be upfront with Nova Scotians and stop hiding key reports and agreements from them. The long-awaited recommendations from the Environmental Racism Panel are being withheld from the public, and a recent agreement with the federal government for funding to support housing infrastructure is let to be made public, as you just alluded to earlier. And your leader saying the people of our province who are living with the tremendous harms of racism deserve to have answers and a path forward. It's unacceptable that they will not release the recommendations of this panel, Chender said. Their refusal to release the report or even share the rationale for keeping the recommendations private comes weeks after this government didn't bother to publicly announce that they signed a new federal infrastructure deal worth $170 million. Other provinces' governments that signed a deal made a public announcement, but not the Houston Conservatives, the NDP noted. During the last session of the legislature, the government tried to reduce the efficacy and oversight powers of the Auditor General and the Freedom of Information and Privacy Officer. You know, your leader saying that people have a right to know and they deserve to know what agreements the government has signed, and just doesn't seem to be happening. And it seems to be continuing a theme of secrecy and a lack of accountability that's being leveled at this government. So, what's your take on it? Do you see that this government is trying to be more accountable, or is it going the other direction?
I've never seen this government take accountability. There's no accountability. There seems to be no transparency in how they conduct themselves as a government. Why would you not release a report on things such as environmental racism? I take that, very strongly. I live in a community. I represent a community that has paid the price of environmental racism. In Whitney Pier, a whole community was wiped out for a dump. The coke ovens, what was left of the steel plant, was left as sludge in what was considered part of Whitney Pier, and took years and years and people being sick before it ever got cleaned up. And there's so many other areas where these types of actions have occurred and are still occurring. When you look at where people decide, when you're looking at where government is deciding to place, whether it's a dump or it's a factory or what have you that can cause harm, it's oftentimes in places where it may be non-white. There might be low income. So there's a classism there as well. And to deny the people of Nova Scotia those reports is, to me, unacceptable. Just because the government has a supermajority does not mean that they are not accountable to the people of Nova Scotia. And by denying the people of Nova Scotia those reports and their ability to look at those reports. They are denying the people of Nova Scotia to hold them accountable to what those reports say.
Now, your party wrote to Premier Tim Houston demanding an update on his commitment to look at the survivors of gender-based violence benefit and why some Nova Scotians are falling through the cracks. Your colleague in the NDP, MLA Susan LeBlanc, her office recently assisted a second woman who was wrongly denied the benefit. This came weeks after LeBlanc first raised the issue in the legislature in March after a constituent was turned down without a valid reason. LeBlanc said the Premier committed to looking into these barriers more than 2 months ago. Now it would be 3. And Nova Scotians deserve an update. Survivors need to know that help is there when they need it. The Survivors of Gender-Based Violence benefit provides monthly benefits to individuals and families fleeing gender-based violence to help them pay rent. Is there any update? Has there been any movement on this file at all?
As far as I know, no. We have not heard an update. And again, as you said, we know of at least 2 women in Nova Scotia that came forward that were turned down for the gender-based violence rental benefit for bureaucratic reasons. How many other women have not come forward that we know of? That's the question. That's the big question. How many we don't know. And although these 2 women were able to obtain those supports, they were in the end, the process took months. It's been taking months. And there shouldn't be these kinds of barriers. So I don't know, for those that are fleeing violent situations, so I don't know if the government has changed their policies yet. But I know these women they're already dealing with a battle. They're already dealing with a huge battle of gender-based violence and everything that comes with it. They should not have to fight the government for benefits and support. And it's unacceptable.
I really appreciate you taking time, especially considering that you are feeling a bit under the weather. And I really do appreciate you taking time for me despite that and talking with me, answering my questions, speaking with our viewers. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I was glad to get through it without coughing all over you.
The Conseil Scolaire Acadien Provincial congratulated grade 11 students who were awarded the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia Medal for the 2025-2026 academic year. According to the CSAP, this prestigious distinction is presented each year to students who stand out not only for their academic performance, but also for their leadership and community involvement. These young people are real role models in their schools and communities, they noted. Recipients are chosen according to rigorous criteria and are appointed by the management of their school, the CSAP said, noting their commitment, sense of responsibility, and positive influence with their peers are at the heart of this recognition. Among the students honored this year were Ecole Beau-Port students Seth Forgeron and Michlynn Martel. Michelle Collette, CEO of the CSAP, said these students embody the balance between academic success and community commitment. Their passion, determination, and spirit of service are a great source of pride for all of us, Collette said.
The committee discussed the deer population. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and send a letter to the Minister of Natural Resources urging the Department to make changes to the 2025 fall hunt that recognizes the impact to residents of the exploding deer population of deer, particularly does in Richmond County.
On the floor, can we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and send letters to the Department of Public Works and Nova Scotia Power to request that roadside clearing be scheduled early in areas of Richmond County where wildlife strikes have increased in frequency.
That motion on the floor. Can we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sampson. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
On the subject of the deer, one day representative of the Department of Natural Resources told me they need data. Now, based on what you've seen, I assume you could attest personally, or based on what you've heard, the deer population is quite large right now and seems to be growing.
Right. I personally had to slow down twice today, and I wasn't. Yeah, actually, it was on the 104. I think I came across 3 groups of them today, just in my travels, and that's sometimes more than usual. But I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that the population's increased. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. I don't think at the end of the day, we see it every day. We hear it from other people, and the proof is there when you see them with your own eyes, right?
So this seemed to arise as a problem that was rooted in Isle Madame. Do you get the sense that it's growing and spreading across the county?
I think you see it in quite a few areas. Now, it's probably most acute here in Isle Madame, but I know especially River Bourgeois and St. Peter's areas have, quite a large deer population as well that you see regularly while driving.
Now, I'm just curious, the county had looked over the past few months at having some officials and some students with NSCC take a look at the deer population. Is that still a possibility? Is that still going ahead?
I believe it is. I'm just not sure where that sits right at this moment, but I know the CAO has been in contact with them. Yeah. The committee discussed cell service. I move that council accept the recommendation of the committee of the whole, send a letter to our new member of parliament, Jaime Batiste, outlining residents' concerns about limited and deteriorating cell service across Richmond County.
We have a motion about the cell service letter. Yeah, we're all seconding that one. So Councillor Mumbercat beat everybody to it. So moved by Deputy Warden Sampson and seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Is there any debate on that? Clearly not. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
The issue involving cell coverage, did that come from your district, or where exactly is that from?
I think that probably came from every district. Although we definitely have some large dead zones in District 5. There is talk of new towers coming in. Sterling has one that looks like it may not be too far off, so that's great news. But besides that, everybody and well beyond Richmond County is noticing service degradation just in general. You're not getting the service you used to in places that 3-4 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, you had solid cell service there, and now it seems to be spotty. So a lot of this tonight, we just wanted to sort of bring that to the attention of the MP, based on the fact that as much as he's a seasoned MP, his electoral boundaries have changed dramatically, and it's much more rural than before. So just to sort of bring that to his radar and make sure he understands our level of concern with it. The committee discussed the Pondville Beach update. I move that council accept the recommendation of the committee of the whole and direct staff to explore the municipality's options for a letter of authority between the municipality and the province for Pondville Beach, and report their findings back to council upon completion of the work in the Pondville Beach Provincial Park management statement.
Can I have a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Sampson. Any discussion?
Is there any financial obligation on our part with this?
To have staff explore? No.
No, but if we do get this letter of authority,
There might be, and that would be,
we'll decide it
expect to
then.
hear from staff what that would look like.
Okay.
There's a motion and on the floor which has been seconded. Can we have all those in favor signify by saying aye? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Whenever we want to make a decision as council, it usually starts with staff. Can you give us some information that help guide that decision? So we know that a tender went out for the phase 1, and I'm fairly certain that the tender either has already or will go out for phase 2. Phase 1 is the parking lot, change room, bathrooms, facilities on the corner of the Pondville Beach Road and Gibbs Lane. And then the second phase is to shore up the wharf, because they really can't let the wharf go because the sand will close up that strait there. So what we know is that work is going to take place and it will take well into the fall. So what we've asked staff to do is, upon completion of the work, because one of the things they have to be mindful of is they have 1.2 million. If it costs $1 million to do the parking lot, they've only got 200,000 for the actual shoring up of the bank. If it costs 200,000 for the parking lot, well, then they've got $1 million to work over here. So we don't even know, they know the dollars, but they don't know exactly what that's going to look, what will your 1.2 million buy? So given that we don't specifically know what that 1.2 million will buy, what we've asked staff is that upon completion of the work at the park, at the Pondville Beach Provincial Park, tell us what potential is there for us to engage in a letter of authority. We may choose not to, but just give us some information that helps us decide. It came from a request from residents sort of last year or the year before, when the beach really had started to fall into disrepair. And somebody asked the question, Point Michaud has one, is there anything similar that could happen in Pondville? But they're two very separate beaches and they're not exactly the same provincial parks. So it may not be anything we end up doing. But whenever we make decisions, we typically get the advice of our staff because they're just really good at what they do. So that's really the motion that was made forth.
No, I'm just curious, and I mean, I'm not asking you this to have you be the point person on the development, but you'd mentioned that the wharf can't be removed because that causes issues with the dune filling in. What happens to the wharf then to make it safer?
So it's actually in the park management plan that you can find online. So their goal is to create, and again, it depends on how much money they have. So 1.2 million subtract the cost of the parking lot. So what my understanding is that they're looking at sort of rock and armor stone that would create the barrier they need, but take it out of commission. Like, it's not going to be a wharf. It will be a barrier as opposed to a functioning wharf. Anybody who's been down there will tell you that wharf is I think past the point of any reasonable return. And so then what other things are there? So accessibility, there is a potential for there to be accessibility features. And that's really what's sort of sprung that letter of agreement, because accessibility usually involves equipment and managing that. So just to put a little shed, like just to put a baby barn, you need some sort of arrangement. So it's really just at the end of the project, what are some options to make best use of that? And I will say, a lot of authority around beaches revolves around being able to get lifeguards. And lifeguards, I was a lifeguard, and you just don't decide to be one day. It takes years of coursework starting when you're 14 to get to the point where you can be a beach lifeguard. So there are some things that given how hard it would be for us to get lifeguards, we would probably never be able to do. Fair enough. We would just like to get that information.
Now, I'm curious, I understand this came up at Committee of the Whole just a couple of weeks ago. Work on the beach actually had to stop briefly because some potential historical artifacts had been found. Can you tell me what went on there?
Yeah, so there's some initial work that was done at that corner of Gibbs Lane and Pondville Beach Road. So that's where the parking lot is going to be. So they were just doing some initial site exploration, and they found some artifacts. And whenever you have artifacts, you need to kind of make sure that in the spirit of reconciliation, you're taking a look at, nobody's doing nothing if that's a burial site, for example, right? Obviously. So they needed to make sure that there was nothing that violated, good ethical practices about, sacred or important ground. In the end, it's nothing of that nature. It doesn't go back to thousands of years. There was like farms down there, and so there are some farm implements. So I've been telling people this because it is going to look a little odd, I think. It's going to look like they just missed a spot. Like, it's going to look like they didn't finish, because I think their expectation is to just leave two little sections where they found these implements. It doesn't change the traffic flow. It doesn't even cut down on the parking spots. But to just leave those a little rougher so that at some point we might be able to put a plaque and said, here, we found something that looked like this, to just pay tribute to the history of that area. But it is nothing so significant that you would say, oh gosh, we can't be anywhere near here.
The only other question I had, this is in your district too. This is, as you mentioned, an issue that's been going on for a couple of years now. How does it feel for you, not only as a warden, but as a councillor for the area and a resident of the area, to see this finally moving forward?
Yeah, really almost a little unfair, right? I came along and, hey, look, a 1.2 million. But I can assure you had nothing to do with that. And kudos to previous councillor and the Save Pondville Beach group, who really were really clear with government, and to the MLA Trevor Boudreau, who, within weeks, I think, of this sort of landing on his desk, there was a meeting in Rocky Bay, and I don't know if you were at it, but there was like 7 or 8 people in a row of tables, and there was a presentation about the really what the beach means to people in that context, but also how does the beach move? What, as a living thing, what does that breakwater mean? Why can you take it out? Why couldn't you take it out? So really very informative, and the park management plan is really something. So it is great to see. It's such an important part of the island, such an important part of our, whether you call it tourism or just people who come home for the summer. But what I have found, honestly, is that in an era of an affordability crisis, you can just pack some sandwiches and go to the beach, and you and your kids can have a great day. So there aren't very many things that you can do anymore that don't cost a fortune. And so the beach is really one of those bastions for folks here.
Tax rates are staying the same as is after Hawkesbury Town Council approved the 2025-2026 budget. Finance Director Erin MacEachen said the $9.49 million budget features a residential tax rate of $1.58 and a residential tax rate of $4.16, plus a 22-cent sewer service charge per $100 of assessment, keeping the rates the same as they were in 1987. The finance director reported some growth in the town, but not at the levels of previous years. MacEachen said 77% of the budget was from assessments, with $6.35 million coming from taxes, and the rest from other revenue sources like the use of recreational facilities. There were cost pressures from growing expenses like policing and fire services, noted MacEachen. The budget contains an $8.5 million capital plan, and funding has been set aside in the operating budget for items like fleet and building upgrades, the finance director noted.
Tax rates staying the same. It's a balanced budget. What do you think worked in the town's favor this year in terms of being able to get this result?
Yeah, so I think we've had some assessment increases, which I think is what has been seen, across Canada, right, with some rising market values of properties, which is very helpful in maintaining balanced budgets. But I think this council and staff are used to, managing and working within the revenues that we have, and are comfortable making adjustments when necessary. So, this was a good budget being put forward. Some allowances for, some tariff concerns that are potentially on the horizon, some investment in local housing initiatives, and some investment in just planning for future growth in the community around our water wastewater system. So I think those were really nice additions to the budget this year that we were able to do without a tax increase, while maintaining the level of service that we've been providing, for a number of years. So
now you mentioned there was some growth this year, but not like there was in recent years past. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I can't give you the specific numbers, but I think we had about a 5% increase in residential and a 7% increase in commercial. The 2025 budget would have been our kind of largest growth that we've seen in a number of years, and that's, consistent across the country, just kind of with the bump in real estate market. But that real estate market is cooling a little bit as of late, which is, why we didn't see the same level of growth.
I'm just wondering, the mayor brought up the spirit of compromise that was around the table in terms of a new council, really, 3 new councillors. Just wondering, what was that experience like for you working with all of them this year?
Yeah, no, it's been a good experience. Obviously when folks come around the table, there's lots of, community needs and lots of things that folks hear as, wants within the community. But same with staff, there's things that are wanted within their departments or Yeah, but you know, we have to work within the revenues that we have. We've been trying really hard to maintain our tax rate while still providing a good level of service to our residents. Yeah, so I think, you know, that's what budget's all about, is balancing and give a little bit of give and take. And this council and previous councils are used to that process. So hey, yeah, it was a process. Right.
Now, you mentioned cost pressures, specifically police and fire services. How much did that account for? And what were there other cost pressures that were also putting strain on or costing?
Yeah, like everything is increasing. Power increases. We have a lot of facilities within the town of Hawkesbury. But yeah, policing, where it is such a large percentage of our budget. You know, I think we're estimating about a 6% increase in our policing, which equates to, you know, over $100,000, which for a budget of our size, where there's not a significant amount of growth year over year, you know, can be a challenge. But yeah, we were able to manage that with assessment growth. So we're happy about that.
Could jump in real quick, sorry guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
The increase in policing, was that from the increase in their budget, or their contracts?
So that would be part of it, right? So, you know, we pay for a portion of officers, and that rate that municipalities pay per officer is set by the Department of Justice. But yeah, all the costs associated with the facilities, with the fleet, and with the resources that the RCMP utilize would be part of what, you know, what causes the increase for the funders of those positions and that service.
Now, you'd mentioned as well, in terms of the capital plan, that work was continuing on the AT trails. Can you give us a specific on whether this is the Granville Street to Sunset Park Trail or another part of the town? Where is it happening?
Yeah, so there is going to be some asphalt within the Sunset Park facility. So I think that was started and kind of was gravelled a little bit last year, and it'll be asphalted this year. There's been some improvements around access to the Dan Willie ball field. And I think we're continuing on with the planning of, you know, continuing on the waterfront connection and hopefully the Reeve Street connection. But the construction, largest part of construction in AT this year will be the Tamarack Trail. So the connection up Sydney Road, taking you into Tamarack, along with a continuation of the Pine Ridge AT Trail in that area of town. So, yeah.
Now, about the budget, what's your reaction to the budget? What are the major takeaways or highlights for you?
Well, I think what people will appreciate when they hear that the budget is approved, as Erin likes to point out every year, we're able to hold the line, is that we have the same rate with our combined sewer rate in residential, and also the combined sewer rate in commercial that we had in the 1980s. So understanding, of course, that assessments do ebb and flow. We do bear in mind that, you know, inflation has, you know, certainly taken its toll on folks. There's rising costs. You know, there's certainly, I don't think COVID-19 is fully in the rear view mirror. Like, we're still kind of feeling the effects of that. And, you know, at the end of the day, our council was motivated to hold the line on the tax rate and look at new and interesting ways to grow our revenue so that we can continue to reinvest those revenue streams in ways that grow the community, so that people can be proud of the town that they live in. You know, we mentioned already, like, just, you know, in terms of like some of the projects that Erin outlined around increasing active transportation in town, you know, continuing to try to move the needle on asphalt and continuing, you know, critical infrastructure like the water tower and other supportive upgrades to our water systems. You know, unfortunately, we had a fire at the Public Works building, so making sure that we have an appropriate place for our public works crew to work out of, so that they can maintain and continue the services that people come to expect and appreciate. So, you know, we're trying to do more with less all the time, kind of like Eastern County Regional Library. So, you know, we're motivated to try our best to be fiscally responsible and prudent, but at the same time, we know we have to continue to invest in Port Hawkesbury. And, every little bit of progress that we can make to make this the most welcoming, the most connected town, a town for everyone. I mean, that's our ultimate goal, but we do want to make sure that we keep it affordable as well.
You mentioned that COVID-19 not quite in the rear view mirror yet, and I am wondering about something that's kind of more in the passenger side mirror, that the issue of tariffs. Was that something that council felt like they had to look over their shoulder at in preparing this budget?
Oh, 100%. So we built in a little bit of a contingency for that because we do understand that the tariffs and just that uncertainty created around that does affect project materials. It affects our services, so it's affecting businesses that service municipalities. It's affecting municipalities. So we did try to factor that into our budget discussions. And, perfect world, we might not have to worry about that, but we don't want to be surprised if we do have to worry about that. So that was definitely a conversation piece at our budget discussion table.
The finance director for the town of Port Hawkesbury is leaving her position. Erin MacEachen was recently named the new director of finance for the Strait Regional Centre for Education. And during the meeting, Port Hawkesbury Town councillors approved a motion from an in-camera session on June 2nd to start the search for a new finance director and post advertisements.
We are so proud of her. She has certainly brought so much capacity to the town of Port Hawkesbury, and just not only around finances, but just she's just a kind and caring person, and I believe she authentically wants to see the town grow and prosper. And she just doesn't come to her job and go through the motions. Like she just, you can tell she cares. And I think at the end of the day, you can have staff that come and they're competent and they can do their job. But when you add that layer of care and compassion to the work that is done, I think that's what makes the huge difference. And, we're very sad, of course, that she's pursuing another opportunity. And we, Erin is one of so many town staff that just go that extra step. They just, authentically want to see the town grow and prosper. And, it's hard to articulate how much we will miss her, but we do understand and support that she, definitely wants to try something new. So we hope that we can get a director of finance and a deputy CAO who will be able to fill her shoes.
Port Hawkesbury Town Council will consider a motion at its final meeting before the summer, pushing for sustainable provincial funding for regional libraries. Following a virtual presentation by Eastern County's Regional Library CEO Laura Emery, Town Councillor Blaine McQuarrie introduced a motion to have the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities lobby for a long-term provincial funding formula for libraries. McQuarrie noted that ECRL staff are not fairly compensated for the increasing number of books and other materials that come and go through branches. Emery said on average, the ECRL ships or takes in 4,000 to 6,000 items each month, noting they are coming in at an unprecedented rate, which is very wearing on current staff. In response to questions from Town Councillors Todd Barrett and Paula Hart about digital services, Emery said they are successful, but costly. The ECRL CEO said the 5-year funding agreement from the provincial government expired on March 31st, and since then, libraries across Nova Scotia are maintaining their budgets through relief grants. According to the findings of a committee of library CEOs, municipal councillors, and others, Emery said the salaries of library employees across Nova Scotia are below the national average. To maintain services and avoid cuts, Emery said the ECRL might have to tap into its operating reserves, which were originally set aside for a new vehicle. She said the ECRL also has issues with some of its buildings. Although services will remain intact in the 2025-2026 budget year, Emery said now is the time for municipalities to lobby the province for long-term sustainable funding.
As far as filling the gaps of provincial funding for libraries, do you think that the role of municipalities is to fill in that funding gap or act more as a lobby to the provincial government?
Well, certainly we appreciated the presentation from Laura Emery from Eastern County Regional Libraries. And it was, really interesting to look at how our regional library is faring out, particularly financially. And obviously they're exercising really wonderful, frugal, and prudence in terms of their in terms of their bottom line. Now, in terms of core funding, we do already fund libraries as municipalities at different, like there's a funding formula that we use. I'm not quite sure exactly what the matrix looks like, but there's probably factors in terms of population, I would say would be one of those driving forces. From Ms. Emery's presentation, I feel that she believes that municipalities can play a huge advocacy role. And certainly our council seemed very receptive in the future if there is a need to provide some advocacy, whether it's in the form of letters or reaching out to the province in a personal way, just to kind of speak to the value of our libraries. And I think what was really wonderful as well in the presentation is, libraries today are more than just books. Libraries are about a whole manner of different services, and from being able to bridge the gap with some products and being responsive to things like COVID-19 and being able to distribute tests to our community and being a platform that people can access electronic and downloadable materials as well. So libraries have been diversifying and growing. So in terms of value, I think it's, I understand that things were kind of frozen in terms of that core funding piece provincially. So hopefully with some advocacy that, inflation affects everybody and costs only continue to rise. And I think the Eastern County Regional Libraries have demonstrated that they have gone as far as they can go to be prudent and responsible in terms of how they use the funding that they receive. So I think next step is to look at maybe more grant monies, more core funding, because we want our populations to grow. And with that growing population means there's going to be more demand for library services. So hopefully in the future, we'll see a greater level of core funding for libraries for our region, but also in other regions across the province.
Now, you just mentioned some of the things that are offered by the Eastern County's regional library branches and by the one right here in Port Hawkesbury, just down the hill at Sarek. Things like COVID-19 information and testing kits and availability of internet services. Can you tell me a little bit about the aspect of community well-being that Laura Emery brought up as a clear mandate for libraries? And do you feel that the library site at Sarek is really hitting that mark in terms of not just being a place for books or for any other media, but also for being open to the community and serving it in different ways?
Most definitely. So, in this day and age where the gap between having and having not in terms of being able to afford something as simplistic as internet. So there are some basic needs that can be fulfilled by our local library, but we can't also forget that it is a community into itself as well. It's a place for young and old to go to see their peers and see friends and meet. It's a safe place to go, whether you're accessing technology or whether you're picking up a book or whether you're meeting friends there or whether you're a young mom or dad and you're just taking your child there there for, a book reading event or other children's activities that are hosted there, or whether you're a senior picking up some free products that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. So the library certainly is much more than just a place to get books in this day and age in 2025. And, certainly our the library in Sarek is no different than any other library across the province. You might see a couple of little different bells and whistles in different libraries. Maybe there's no two libraries created equally. But at the end of the day, if we want our library to grow, then the core funding question needs to be addressed.
Town Council adopted the idea plan for 2025 through to 2028. Called A Town for Everyone, Facilities Manager Gordy Snook said the province will conduct regular reviews of the plan to make sure it aligns with provincial standards. Since the plan was submitted to the province, Snook was told it will be part of a model for the rest of Nova Scotia.
The idea plan, what does that entail and what stands out to you about that?
Oh, absolutely. So the town of Port Hawkesbury had, by motion of council, formed an accessibility committee prior to 2022. And the accessibility committee, of course, is the same as mandated by all municipalities to have an accessibility committee with at least 50% first voice who experience accessibility challenges. So we continue to comply as a committee. But what made sense to us is that, and of course, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we had a very fulsome accessibility plan to cover off our accessibility goals from 2022 to 2025. So now we're in 2025, and there were some other mandated, work that the province are asking municipalities to complete. One was to update accessibility plans all across the province, and the other was to create and implement a plan for inclusion, diversity, and equity. So because our original accessibility plan already had some pretty strong features around inclusion and equity, it made sense for our committee to pivot from an accessibility committee to an idea committee. And why it's called an idea committee is because it's an acronym. Of course, the world needs more acronyms, right? So it's inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So that's what IDEA stands for. And so this was a kind of, no pun intended, also an inclusive way to take all of the work that we outlined in terms of small, medium, and long-term accessibility recommendations. And through this new piece of work, the IDEA plan, it is an exercise for which we take our original accessibility committee, reflect on it, and determine what did we achieve between 2022 and 2025. So our committee came up with the accessibility report card. So that is going to be one of our key priorities in our IDEA plan. The other priority that we have is for our IDEA committee to do the necessary research around inclusion, equity, and diversity, because it's a fairly new kind of a compass, if you will. We want to make sure that our town has newcomers coming all the time. We have new businesses springing up, and we have a campus at the Strait Area campus and Nautical Institute that has like a steady influx of new students that are enrolling every year for short and medium and long-term programs. So our population changes and ebbs and flows. So one of our priorities is to do research around, diversity, like what, we want to take the pulse of, what our town currently looks like from a diversity lens. So that research can be anything from the first step will be, we have an idea plan that has been approved by council. So it'd be great to kind of have an opportunity to present that out to the community and get some feedback. But then have welcoming events and have surveys, other ways to kind of figure out, okay, what does our town look like today? What does it look like next year? What does it look like in 2028, in the final year of our plan? A big priority in our plan is also around truth and reconciliation and reconciliation. So we've done quite a bit of work in the town of Port Hawkesbury that would fit into that bucket. However, we were doing that work without a true compass. So this plan is now a compass that we can follow, so that we can start by, our first step later this month will be taking some training so that we can understand truth and reconciliation from the Indigenous perspective. So we're going to be taking training as a council and as a staff, and our idea committee as well will be able to participate in that. And we can do things like, let's have a unique land acknowledgement that the town can use when we need to do so. Let's look at creating a plan around truth and reconciliation, and what does that look like? And the final priority is, how are we sharing and receiving information from our community? So we came up with an idea that's called the Idea Portal, and it's between website and between social media and in person. It's we always want this plan to be a living plan, so that as our community ebbs and flows and our population changes, we want to make sure that we are able to have a plan that pivots to the changing circumstances around our diverse makeup. So we will be hoping to receive information, ideas, and be able to share out all that information as well, so that we have a multimodal way to receive and share information, and to do so for the entirety of our plan. Sure.
Gordy Schnook said that you guys had a model for that the provincial government thought it was an all-encompassing model. Anything that you guys are proud of as far as that was told, or anything?
Okay, so when we were working together on our plan, and this isn't something that just happens overnight. So the idea around the accessibility report card was really kind of a continuance from the work our accessibility committee had done prior to the pivot to the idea committee. And, because we wanted to constantly, every year, take a look, okay, where all of our accessibility recommendations, where are they? What has been achieved? What's in progress? What's slated to happen and when? What critical partnerships do we need to still work on? So it only made good sense to, to make that an important part of this current idea plan. And I think when we were in the process of looking at inclusion, diversity, and equity, we came to realize that we've been doing a lot of that kind of work since 2017, but we just weren't labeling it really as inclusion, diversity, and equity. So we were kind of like doing this work without a compass or without a plan. So I think what we were really kind of proud about is like, oh, we're not starting from scratch here. We've been really active in truth and reconciliation and welcoming events, and working with the Straight Area Filipino Society, and working with Y-Reach, and and then working on inclusion around accessibility as well. But even in our original plan, we were talking about newcomers and the barriers, that maybe some language barriers that are faced, and maybe like in terms of like accessing information and what that might look like. So it really was such a short bridge to traverse to take on inclusion, diversity, and equity. So we're really proud to realize that we're not starting from scratch. So and it was great that the province kind of urged us to kind of take that inward look to say, hey, come up with what are some examples of some of the work that this plan is kind of encompassing. And when we did kind of take that backwards look, we're like, we did pretty good work in the past. So we're pretty proud of the progress we made to date, even though this is just approved tonight. We're really excited to see what the future brings on the idea side of things.
Can I steer it back to accessibility just for a moment? Obviously, the clock is ticking on a 2030 deadline from the provincial government in terms of having all public buildings be accessible. Do you feel this 3-year idea plan basically moves the town that much closer to being able to reach that 2030 deadline?
Absolutely. So another kind of realization that we made as we were drafting the report card for accessibility is that as we drew out those recommendations from the 2022-2025 plan, we realized that with those recommendations that came forward from our committee, there was a whole other body of accessibility work that wasn't even, recommended from the committee, like, continuing to make the Granville Green accessible, like continuing to push in new active transportation trails so that we are making our town even more connected for people who are, whatever ways they move, whether it's in a wheelchair, whether it's with a walker, whether it's pushing a baby stroller. So we did a lot of accessibility work that really wasn't in that original plan. And isn't that something to celebrate? So, and another wonderful thing that we kind of realized in the report card piece, and we're not by any means finished, we still have to take a look because we've been so tremendously busy over the past 2 terms that, we want to make sure we capture as much of that as possible. And the report card will be online, so it's not like it's set in stone. So we can continue to update it. Maybe something's in progress. When's the finish date? Okay, then we can mark it as completed. But we're pretty, I think we're on track for the 2030 goals. Certainly we look at every piece of work we do now through an accessibility lens, and I think that is part and parcel of the tremendous support we have at the staff level with the town. And as you can see, the support from council, not just on accessibility, but now on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The town's contract with the Cape Breton Regional Enterprise Network was renewed by Town Council. CAO Terry Doyle said staff looked at the amendments to the agreement, which involves municipalities and First Nations, and found no issues.
Now, as far as the agreement with the Cape Breton Wren, what does the town get from that?
So currently we share an economic development officer with the municipality of the County of Richmond. So that allows us to do some specialized work with our economic development officer. And some of it is obviously regional work that will create a rising tide for both Richmond and for the town. Some of it is unique to just the town, and some of it's unique to just Richmond. So that in of itself has tremendous value. But then when you add to it the assets and the resourcefulness of some of the other staff within the Cape Breton Partnership, so someone that specializes in immigration, for example, somebody, some programs as well, like the welcoming network. We also have the opportunity to tap into some of those programs and be able to utilize some of the specialty staff that is part of the complement of the Cape Breton Partnership as well in the Cape Breton Wren. So I personally see tremendous value for the money. And as you can see, from the long list of Indigenous and municipal partners that are part of the Cape Breton Wren, I think there's also value in that collaboration piece and working together and, getting together as, and I represent the town on the liaison committee for the Cape Breton Wren, just being able to, hear what, what our neighbors in Unama'ki are doing, and, and is there opportunities to work together, and our economic development officers talk together too. So I think that if you look back to the one Nova Scotia, we know that our best way forward to grow our communities is to collaborate. So this is definitely an important pathway to do that important work.
Town Council agreed to send a letter of support for a project by Dalhousie University that could involve the Oceans Innovation Center in Port Hawkesbury.
I was curious, could you give just a little more detail about the last item you brought to the council table regarding Dalhousie and a potential partnership involving the Oceans Innovation Center? Essentially, what is Dal asking from the town, and what did the town put forward tonight?
Right. So we are always interested in ways that we can collaborate with really any entities within the province in terms of innovation. Certainly we are very committed to look at the green energy and renewable energy as emerging sectors. We have green hydrogen development happening in Point Tupper. And of course, Martin Thompson is our energy manager, who are looking at how can we participate in those emerging sectors, both the town and the county, which I think are very important. So Dalhousie University is very interested in putting forward an application to do some of what we would like to see occur with the project that we are collaborating on an offshore wind center of excellence. So we see a pathway in working in that, I guess, towards that end. Dalhousie, I think it would be an important partner, but also innovation centers across the province. So I don't necessarily see it as something that could be just one brick and mortar location. I think that it's going to take resources from across the province to be able to collaborate to create that kind of enough capacity that we need to be able to fully understand our role in the emerging sectors around, renewable energy, particularly in the marine renewable energy. So this is just a preliminary kind of letter of intent. We're happy to support that. Council was unanimously supportive of that. We want to continue to look at potential partners for our Ocean Innovation Center, and we want to continue to work with important partners like the County of Richmond, and see where things go. I mean, it's certainly not a guarantee when you apply for funding, but we certainly hope we wish Dalhousie University all the best of luck in their application process.
I just had one more question sort of on this. The Offshore Wind Center of Excellence, I have heard this term mentioned a number of times. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what you feel this center would look like and what it would do? I don't know that I've ever really gotten a specific answer on that. What do you envision, or what do you and your partners envision for this Center of Excellence?
Offshore wind is new to Canada. We're really in our infancy in terms of exploring the potential. The federal government and the provincial government are working their best to create parallel pathways to a regulatory framework around offshore wind. And what I see as a potential around an offshore wind center of excellence is multiple reasons why we would need that. It's about building local capacity. It's about bringing together a network of critical partners between Indigenous communities, municipalities, industry partners. Certainly our educational partners are going to be important. It could be about research. It could be about when you look at force, it's about, creating a space for the community to be able to come in and do their own learning and experience, how can a community participate in this? It's about determining our role as a community. And if we're not kind of at the table in this way, then all these decisions will get made absent of our involvement. So I think an offshore wind center of excellence is a way to really give these emerging industries a very local lens and a very like strong local connection to it as this industry is emerging. So it's about research, but not only research, it's about innovation. So our weather, our wind, we have world-class wind. So, but we also have different ocean, a different ocean environment. And, so innovation really can curtail to the Atlantic Canadian environment and weather events and all manner of things. And also the Offshore Wind Center of Excellence can work at what kind of training do we need? What kind of assistance do businesses that currently exist, what supports can we create for them to pivot so that they can participate in supply chain? So an Offshore Wind Center of Excellence. Right now, there's no really good one strong answer for what exactly it could be. There's lots of potential around what it can be. And I think what it needs to be is how we can best participate in those emerging industries. So, any one of those things you can pull in is going to improve our circumstances to be able to fully participate in these emerging industries.
Would this be housed in the Oceans Innovation Center, or is that still up for discussion?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think that this kind of endeavor could be one brick and mortar location, but I feel like it could be a network of locations, and we surely would love the Oceans Innovation Center to be part of that network.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.